celebrations while I was in the back, but that's all right. What happens when the unstoppable cannonball hits the immovable pole? A question I'm sure that everyone in the entire world has pondered at one time or another. Young children run home from school to ask their mother, Mommy! Young children ran home from school to ask their mothers, Mommy, can you tell me what happens when the unstoppable cannonball hits the immovable pole? And the mother looks at her child and says, Child, bless your soul. I mean, why are you asking me a question about the pole? And the child responds, because I know that you know everything, Mommy. That's what I've been told. So the mother wrestles and grapples with her thoughts, thinking about her child's question. And she says, Child, look, I have a suggestion. Why don't you go out and play for now, and I'll tell you later on. But know this, that for that cannon to move an immovable pole, that something must be going wrong. And her child stands there in awe, waiting for his mother to say more. She realizes that she has to answer his question, even though her child is only 4. He seems so intent on having an answer to this question, and it seems so heavy on his mind. So she said, Child, come here and sit on my lap. And her teeth, she starts to grind. She pauses for a moment, trying to come up with an answer to the question. And she wished that she had her computer to Google to get some help or even some suggestions. I mean, she couldn't even call a friend or choose A, B, or C. She couldn't even call a friend or choose A or B or C. She thought and searched in her mind, oh, so frantically. And finally, she started to think of an idea. Maybe she could tell him in the form of a fairy tale and just let the story unfold. She said, Son, this story is a secret. I'm going to tell you now, but before, it's never been told. And he stared in awe at his mother, with his eyes big as giant saucers. And at this time, the mother wished her son could be distracted by her 7-year-old daughter. But her daughter was at the sitters and wouldn't be home for another hour. So she started to tell her story using all of her improvisational power. You see, once upon a time, there was a man named Mr. Pole. He stood still for so long, people thought he had lost his soul. It seems no one could reach him or even get him to move, and even the strongest and mightiest wind could not shake his unstoppable groove. He was immovable, immobile, motionless. He just stood stock still. And then one day, a gigantic cannonball started to roll towards him down the hill. The cannonball picked up speed, and it seemed it only had one destination: to get to the man named Mr. Pole without hesitation. And like a bullet with a target, it progressed at mind-blowing speed, heading towards Mr. Pole and never taking any heed. The people in the town made bets. Their eyes were filled with greed. One man said, I bet you that cannonball go dump, knock down Mr. Pole and make that man bleed. And so the townspeople started to get loud as they laid down their bets. Another woman shouted, Boy, I'm telling you, this is as good as it gets. And while they made noise and shouted, Mr. Pole never made a sound. He just stood still in silence as if the people weren't around. And the cannonball gathered speed. This was really quite intense. It knocked over a house, and it knocked over an iron fence. It destroyed Mrs. Smith's kitchen and tore through John's backyard. I'm telling you, this cannonball was moving fast and hard. As it got closer to Mr. Pole, there was not a breath, there was not a sound. As everyone waited for the cannonball to knock Mr. Pole to the ground, it got closer and closer, but still Mr. Pole was as cool as a cucumber, because you see, he'd already been standing there from June until December. And as the cannonball got closer, the crowd thought they saw him flinch. Did you see that? Someone shouted. I swear Mr. Flag moved over an inch. No, he didn't, another shouted. You're just seeing what you want to see. Mr. Flag is immovable, I know that, so just let it be. What is meant to happen will happen. And then there was a loud sound. It was ear-splitting and earth-shattering, and the people hit the ground. And as they slowly got up to see what it was that had occurred, there stood Mr. Pole as steadfast as ever, never wavering, the man never even stirred. And all around him, the cannon was in giant pieces all over the land and the earth and the ground. People were flabbergasted, appalled, even as they watched Mr. Pole in the middle of a mound of cannon pieces and cannon parts and cannon splinters and slivers. And that man just stood still and immovable and immobile. It sent real shivers up the spine of every person who lived in that town, because they could see for themselves what they always heard, that nothing could break Mr. Pole down. For they had a local hero, a man who could break cannons and never flinch or draw back. They had a hero who was strong and sturdy and who could fend off any pending attack. So the moral of the story, or at least, son, from what I've been told, is stand up for something and stand strong, be mighty, and my son, most of all, be bold. Yes. Don't let anyone charge at you, and don't let anyone put you down. Just stand firm and be proud of who you are, just like Mr. Pole did in his town. Though everyone made fun of him because of what they thought he could not do, he proved that standing still sometimes is the key to seeking truth. He showed that we can break new ground and shatter the preconceived ideas that people have about who we are. These ideas sometimes come about from fear of the unknown and the unexplored and the unattended to, but oftentimes the story we hear about people so often aren't even true. And so, my son, if you can stand strong and not be moved by negativity or forces that want to knock you down, you will be just like Mr. Pole and be the strongest man around.
Come on.
And so the boy looked at his mother and said, "Wow, thanks, I never knew. Thanks, Mom, for giving me the answer. See, you're the greatest." And he said, "I love you." And she said, "Son, I love you too."
Yeah.